Hey, Greg Matsen here. Make sure that you subscribe and hit that bell for notifications. I think you're going to enjoy this conversation between an evangelical and a Latter-day Saint. Stephen has been on the program a couple of times before, but we talk about both sides of the coin here. Those that are negative towards Stephen, other evangelical peers, for what he's doing and reaching out to Latter-day Saints, and on the Latter-day Saints side, what many people have to say about me reaching out to people like Stephen and other evangelicals. There are some dynamics that are very parallel between the two faiths. I think you'll enjoy. Here we go. All right, welcome to Cwic Show. My name is Greg Matsen, and I am your host. In this episode, we bring back Stephen Pynakker from Mormon Book Reviews. Welcome, Stephen.
Greg, it's always a pleasure to come on your program. I think I love it because I'm such a naughty boy. I feel like such a naughty boy whenever I come on your program or you come on mine, and so I feel like I want to be a little naughty today.
Okay. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about interfaith relationship between evangelicals and Latter-day Saints. Some good things, but maybe some things that are a little bit sticky.
Yep.
And I know that you've had some experiences as you've brought things to light and you're in building your relationship with Latter-day Saints with your evangelical peers. Tell me how that's gone.
Well, I mean, overall, this endeavor, and it will be next month. It will be 3 years that I started this channel. Okay, and didn't know a single Latter-day Saint. Lives in Florida. Brought a lot of knowledge to the table. How much I didn't know because I never even had conversations with people about what I know and my studies and research of Latter-day Saintism, but also then my experience, my journey in the evangelical world, being raised in the evangelical world, and then leaving the evangelical world, and then ultimately becoming an atheist, and then coming back into my community with my eyes wide open, and with also a lot of concerns about what I'm seeing in my community. And so that was kind of the two levels I actually operate in probably about 10 different levels now, but the two levels I was operating at was me as an evangelical stranger coming from the enemy camp with a peace offering. Let's talk. And that's really what this has become, a conversation between the evangelical world and the Latter-day Saint world. And what also is important is people don't realize that behind the scenes, I'm getting people talking together that you'll never know about. I'm getting people. I had a very prominent, the son of a very prominent Jewish rabbi, came to Salt Lake City last week. Came from Brooklyn, New York. He contacted me because I'm very well known in the ultra Orthodox community. That's a long story in and of itself. Again, that's the interfaith aspect of what I'm trying to do. And he reaches out to me last week or the week before. He says, "Hey, I'm going to be at a conference in Park City, and I have one free day, and I got a friend of mine that wants to come, and we'd like to get some recommendations from you about sites we could go see while we're in Utah, religiously speaking, within the Mormon context." And I put him in touch with somebody who's a friend of mine, Monica, who has a church calling to do interfaith work. So here you have these two Jewish guys given a guided tour of Temple Square and all the adjacent facilities. They did some family genealogical work. They went and visited the Church History Museum. He was thoroughly impressed with it and was very grateful that this thing happened. This isn't something that's going to be on the channel, but this is every day is an interfaith act. And I'm getting, and especially within the evangelical world, I'm getting prominent evangelical pastors behind the scenes having these conversations. Many of them can't publicly acknowledge they're doing this because they'll get in trouble by their denominational authorities or from people in their congregation. But again, folks, the cat's out of the bag. The conversations that hadn't happened in the past are happening again. And I think the work that Jeff McCullough is facilitating that. And I also think that the work that I'm doing is facilitating it as well. Like somebody told me last week, they said, "Steve, you and Jeff McCullough are the only two evangelicals that Latter-day Saints listen to." And I consider that to be a very privileged place to be. And so, yeah, it's been a very interesting journey, but I also feel like there's a lot of concerning things that I do see coming from the evangelical camp that isn't very Christ-like. And I do feel like is bullying. And I just feel like I wanted to come on your platform to kind of talk about some concerns about certain groups and people in my camp that I think are doing tremendous damage, inflicting tremendous damage in this whole interfaith endeavor.
Okay. Well, start with it. Tell me what's going on. I know, because look, this is what happens. I have a lot of discussions with Jeff McCullough, for example. I have discussions with other fairly prominent evangelicals that I've made friends with over the last several years, and it always comes down to the same kind of thing. I think because it's the same thing that I experience, right? As I speak with you or I speak with Jeff, for example, those are the two most maybe prominent evangelicals that I put on the show. I get pushback,
Mm-hmm.
right? And not from most people, but some,
Yeah.
right? They're kind of like, well, wait a minute. And I will say, and I'm going to let you speak on this, but I think it's for different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Some are the same, but I think there's some different reasons why I would get pushback from my end and you would get pushback from your end.
Mm-hmm.
But tell me about the pushback that you get.
It's so fascinating because what's so interesting is I literally had evangelicals say that I actually have a whole hidden agenda, that I work for the church. This is stuff that has been leaked to me on different message boards that people have been monitoring. And that I'm a wolf in sheep's clothing, which that doesn't sound very familiar. and so I'm hearing the same types of things. And yeah, you get this small, kind of fringy, but minority. But these people, they have very loud voices. Their influence might be disproportionate to how it actually is, but still they are affecting the conversation. So I do think that it's important that we do address that. And that's actually the reason just so you know, I literally was thinking of reaching out to John DeLynn of Mormon Stories to have this conversation. But then I thought about your platform, I think, is better for this because you're actually doing the interfaith stuff. You're talking to me and Jeff and David Boyce as well, 52 Churches. You're also engaging and speaking at evangelical conferences and also speaking at joint conferences that are Latter-day Saint oriented that are inviting evangelicals. So I really feel like you're doing a very, very important work in facilitating these conversations. And I think for all the haters out there of you, okay, I want to put this out here. This is for those of you who are from the ex-Mormon community or you're from the progressive community and you attack Greg Matsen. I just want you to think of one important thing. A lot of criticisms that people make about religion in general is that all the wars have been caused because these religious groups would battle each other and we have religions to blame. Well, don't you want peacemakers within these religions to talk to each other? And that we can diffuse the tensions between these groups. So actually, I think you're doing a work that could be lauded by a secular people as well. That's why I continue to have you on my program, because I think you're doing a very important work to facilitate. If Greg Matsen gets canceled, then it really ultimately will cause suffering for bringing peace into our camps. And I don't want to cancel. Greg Matsen should not be canceled. I think Greg Matsen is never going to be canceled. But I think for those of you who are trying to do it, you're actually undermining a peacemaking work. Just thought I'd put my words out there for you.
All right. So you're not a wolf in sheep's clothing, but and you're not getting paid by the church, but it sounds like you're getting paid by me. No, I'm just kidding. No, I appreciate that. That's great. So as you've gone through this, then has this evolved in a way where you've got your platform has grown. You're speaking more and more to several different Latter-day Saints, and now you speak to several different voices throughout the Restoration movement. But with the Latter-day Saints, does this put you in a position where there are, how do I say this? I mean, is it the more fundamental, the more, I would say dogmatic, maybe even voices start to come out and say, wait a minute, Stephen, what are you doing? Why are you doing this?
Yes. I would, and I think I texted this to you, is that it's this really coming from the hyper Calvinist neo-fundamentalist camp. The people that look cool and have their beards and, they're fashionable. And, I do mixed martial arts and all these kind of, I'm the cool Christian, but man, they're
mixed martial arts is a part of that.
Yeah, perhaps. I don't know. It's just a weird group of people, to be perfectly honest with you. I think that the camp of people that are attacking me represent a very toxic element within the evangelicalism, which has infected evangelicalism. Don't get me wrong. It's a mess over here. Okay. It's gotten political. It's gotten very nasty. You got all these gatekeepers to say, you're a Christian, you're not a Christian. You're going to hell, you're going to heaven. These people, it's insane. Okay. So I just want to give you a parallel here. I tell people that you could argue that Mormonism, in one sense, got one of its starts was from that Presbyterian minister who went to the Smith family and said, Alvin is burning in hell because he did not get a Presbyterian baptism. I think that's one of the impetuses for Mormonism, because it was Joseph Smith tried to find a way to get his brother into heaven. In one sense, he did. He found a way. Okay, which I think is a beautiful thing in one sense. I think it's, whether you want to take it literally or metaphorically, I think it's a beautiful story. Okay. So then I go last fall is when I started getting more and more attacks. And this actually goes all the way back to the beginning of the channel, that this camp, this particular group of neo-fundamentalists, hyper-Calvinists, is I'm going to Utah to witness the historical event of the very first time a person who's going to be baptized into the Church of Jesus Christ in the state of Utah. Those are the Bickertonites. Okay. So it's a historic thing. I fly out there just to witness the baptism, and then attend the very first Bickertonite church service ever. And I have this Presbyterian minister that morning. I'm announcing, hey, I'm coming. And that morning, this Presbyterian minister goes to me and says, is Joseph Smith a true prophet of God, or is he a con man or a scoundrel, something like that? And I'm like, what a stupid question. It's an either or question. I'm like, was David the apple of God's eye, or was he a murderer? See, people are complex. Even producers of scripture are. And I just really hate that Manchian black and white thinking. I think it's important to have your values, but I think sometimes we get too, and I see it in the ex-Mormon community, they're just as black and white and just as fundamentalist as many religions are. So I'm not giving them a free pass either. But when he asked that question, I thought, that's the same spirit. That Presbyterian minister has the same spirit of that Presbyterian minister that went after the Smith family and saying that Alvin's burning in hell. And that's why there's, if you will, the need for a restoration and the need for a reformation. Because when we have that kind of thinking that basically just infect our world, that and then they put these blinders on and they live in this very small world. I feel bad for him, because this guy, he's a pastor of what's called the Orthodox Presbyterian Church, which is very similar to the Christian Reformed Church that my family has roots in. He reminds me a lot of the old-time Christian Reformed pastors that came in my life as a kid. And I feel like he just doesn't even have the tools. He still thinks like a 19th century Calvinist. And we're living in the 21st century now. And this guy's been in Utah for over 20 plus years trying to save Mormons. And nobody's ever heard of him. I went to a Christian, a Mormon scholar who's a Christian minister, and I said his name. He's like, I've never even heard of that guy. I said, well, do you believe that he had a TV show on the Christian television station, the same channel that Sean McCraney of Heart of the Matter was on? This guy had his own TV show. He moderates debates. He just thinks it's a really big deal what he's done, and literally has had no impact in the Latter-day Saint community. Nobody's ever heard of this guy. And this is the issue that I have. We have these so-called cottage industries, these evangelical ministries that go into Utah and say, we're saving Mormons. Send us your money so we can save Mormons and show how they're wrong, show that Joseph Smith was a con man, show that they were doing satanic temple rites in the temple, or whatever garbage nonsense they're putting out there, propaganda, spiritual pornography. Okay, a lot of this stuff is garbage that they're putting out. And they move to Utah, and some are getting 6-7 figures a year. Some of these guys are making live in nice little homes and drive nice cars and get to go around and get book deals. And they're basically profiting by bashing the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The problem is nobody listens to them. Nobody even knows who these people are. People dismiss them. And that's the reality of the situation. Is a lot of these Christians are giving money to these organizations, and they're just basically not having any impact on. I'm speaking from experience here. If I were to give the names of these people, go to the Mormon History Association and say, there's this group that has research in its name, Mormon researchers. That's part of their name. And I don't want to get too much publicity, these people. Nobody would have said, I have no idea who these people are. So they have research in their thing, and they're putting out stuff, but they're not even acknowledged by the scholarly community. So they have no impact in the scholarly community. And by the way, just so you know, Greg, I was recently offered to sit on the board of directors of one of the oldest, most important Mormon scholarly associations. And I was offered a spot on the board of directors. I turned it down because I said, I'm just going to be a name on a piece of paper, and I think it'd be better off to have somebody who's more hands-on. I would want to it was just an honor to be nominated, but that's the extent. Like, a lot of people think I'm having an effect in the culture, like a popular culture. The biggest impact this channel is having is actually in the scholarly community. And even the scholars, even though I'm just some bro who wears a flat brim hat and lives with his mom in a 50-year-old mobile home, the work that I'm doing is actually respected by the Latter-day Saint scholarly community. to the point that I hear from people at the Maxwell Institute all the time. The president of the new executive director of the Maxwell Institute is a self-professed fanboy of my channel. So here we have these so-called Christian researchers that nobody's ever heard of, putting out these books, putting out materials that nobody's reading inside of Utah. And it's not having any impact on the conversation.
That's what I was going to ask. Is it even that effective for them? You know, I mean, they're going to have an objective here of, well, we're going to save the Mormons. I mean, how, and sure, there's going to be some people here and there, but it seems to me that those that have that kind of a mentality, and I'm not talking about just evangelicals, I'm talking about all denominations, right? It's like, look, there is always, this is something that I have taken a while to learn in my life. And that is the need to be right is very strong. And it can overcome a lot of things that are a lot better and are of a lot higher value.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea of I'm going to show them that I'm right, or from my side, I'm going to show them that I'm right.
Yep.
Right, is a pretty bankrupt approach to anything. And yet that's honest. And honestly, I will say this, right, because we are a minority in this country. That's what we're used to.
Yeah.
That's what we're used to hearing. And it's the signs at General Conference and the people saying that you're going to hell. And I mean, I don't know where we're going in this conversation, but I can give you other examples in my own personal life. But it's like, you know, from a young age, I was refined from this opposition into a point of, oh, well, I guess this is how people feel about what I believe in. And there's going to be this immunity that is built up, that it's water off my back. You know, that's all it is. And when I hear it.
Yeah, that's exactly, and that's the whole point, is that, well, I do actually think that toxic masculinity, look, I'm not a politically correct guy, and I'm not a progressive, which is another thing. They keep on calling me a progressive, which is a flat out lie. And I've demonstrated on multiple occasions that I have identified as myself as a libertarian Christian, which means if you want to do selective editing, you could make me sound like I'm some left-wing progressive, or you can make me sound like I'm some right-wing demagogue. It's all a matter, you know, I'm a Rorschach test, you know, but of how people identify. But what I find interesting is you have these people that are doing this, and I really think they're virtually all males. They all have one thing in common. They typically are male. And I do feel that it is a type of toxic masculinity. And this isn't just in this corner. We can see this. There are Mormon apologists that actually have attacked me that also are all male. And I would argue it's a type of toxic masculinity. And it's that need I have to be right. Now, I have to say, when I was a young kid, I was that person. So I know what it's like to even be that person. And I know how, in my mind, the way it works, the end justifies the means. It don't matter how you get there. The important thing is to show them they're wrong. And whatever tactic I need to do it, whatever little diversions that I need to do, however I'm going to do it, I'm just going to run roughshod over them and put them in their place. Okay. That was my spirit that I had too. So that same toxicity also was part of me as well. So I'm kind of reaching out to these people and say, listen, it doesn't have to be this way. The problem I have with a lot of these evangelicals that are attacking me, and a lot of them are doing it either publicly, like I'm really bothered by one in particular, one guy who's tied in with this one group. His name, I'll just give his first name. His name's Aaron. And he attacked me in August of 2021 when I was talking about in an episode, I had a guest on, and I made a comment. I said, I don't have a dog in this fight. And he attacked me. He said, how can you call yourself an evangelical Christian and say you don't have a dog in this fight? So I'm like, what is he talking about? So I rewind the tape. I rewatch it that night afterwards. And I said, yeah, you know, when it comes to the Book of Mormon geography issue, I don't have a dog in this fight. That's the context. Like, he wanted me to take a position on Book of Mormon geography. I mean, that's a weird thing.
Wait a minute, Stephen. What is the evangelical position on Book of Mormon geography?
got to. Well,
this is fascinating to me.
I'll give you my position, but I can't. The evangelical position is they don't know because they don't know anything about Mormonism. That's the reality. And because of their ignorance, these people are able to raise some nice money and say, well, see, they look at you guys like, well, we got, like sending out missionaries to the rest of the world. You're this lost people group that needs to be saved. And we're sending out money to help people get these people saved because they're heading for hell. They think of you no differently than any other group throughout the world that they would be trying to do missionary work with. Okay. The problem is that's all they know about Mormonism is it's so limited. Like outside of the Mormon corridor, the knowledge of Mormonism from evangelicals is quite simply, okay, there was that John Smith guy and Brigham Young, and then they usually conflate you guys with the Jehovah's Witnesses. I mean, they just don't know anything. So I don't really have a position. But the point about this his attack on me was I went to him, I said, listen, I said, that's, and say, I don't know how you can call yourself a Christian or an evangelical Christian or some variation of that and say that. So he is the referee. He's the one that's going to determine whether I'm in or out of the camp based on just me making a statement, which was stupid. So I reached out to him continuously. I literally spent almost 2.5 years, reaching out to him and said, listen, let's you and I talk on Zoom and have a conversation, a civil conversation. Then last spring, he started attacking me again. Never gave me the heads up. When I would be critical of him on some programs, because I have mentioned him by name on other programs, including Mormon Stories, I reached out to a mutual friend and say, hey, let him know that I'm going to be talking about him tonight on today's episode of Mormon Stories or whatever. And after a while, I just gave up on that because he would never, ever take the Zoom call. And do you know why? Because bullies like to pick on people that's beneath their weight class. They don't want to talk to somebody that actually is more knowledgeable on the subject than they are, because they know that they're going to be fried. I mean, I would literally just march circles around these people and expose their ignorance of the topic. These so-called Christian experts of Mormonism, their knowledge of Mormonism is so superficial and so ridiculous, it's laughable. And I have other Christians, just so you know, there are many. I have an alliance of many other Christian ministers and other Christian scholars who are engaged in Mormon scholarship, who are knowledgeable of the topic, all agree with me that these people are not doing any good for the community. And I almost feel like I had to come into this world to help clean up the mess that these guys have done to our relationships between our camps. They're the wedge, and they want to keep the wedge there. And that's why they're attacking me. And that's why they're probably attacking Jeff McCullough and others, because they see us as a threat. Also, I think in one sense, a threat to their livelihood. And because the evangelicals are now coming, I have a large evangelical audience now, and they're learning about Mormonism from this channel now. And once you've watched 450 plus videos with hundreds of guests, with some of the top scholars of Mormonism, some of the top Christian scholars in the world, some of the top intellectuals, and you name them, I've had them on. Some of the top critics of the church, some of the top people at BYU, and all and from the Maxwell Institute, and from Fair Mormon, and from all these groups. You're going to have a much better education. You're going to have a much better knowledge of Mormonism than anything that you're going to get out of most of these Christian organizations. Now, there's a few groups that I do feel like, I feel like Ross Anderson has a group called Faith After Mormonism. It's an evangelical outreach group, and it's admittedly that's what they do. But I feel like he wrote a couple books for Zondervan, which I think are actually pretty good. He actually did a book about the Book of Mormon, explaining what the Book of Mormon is and explaining what Mormonism is to evangelical audiences. And I thought he had the right spirit. Okay, so there's a guy that I like, and of course, let me put it, you love her or hate her. The Tanners played a very pivotal role. Sandra Tanner, who's still with us, Gerald passed away a while back. I feel that they're legit. They're the real deal. Like, they did real research, right? I mean, BYU scholars would go to their store to get materials so they could do research. Okay, so they actually played a positive net contribution to Mormon scholarship. Okay. And so, and just so you know, I always feel like the Tanners are painted. So again, if you don't have to, I'll just riff a little bit on this. There's a story, and it's in this book called Lighthouse, about the Tanners. So I'm just trying to say, if you're going to do Christian apologetics or Christian research, I think that they're the ones to emulate. So there's this story. Now, Gerald and Sandra Tanner left the LDS Church when they were young. They were just like, I think they were teens. And Gerald, but still believed in the Book of Mormon. And Gerald did a lot of research on Mormonism. Well, when they finally made their final break with the Restoration, they attended a church in downtown Salt Lake City. And they were just kids, like 21 or 22, 23 years old. And Gerald goes to the pastor and says, listen, if you say one ill word about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints from the pulpit in this church, I'm going to stand up and I'm going to walk out. That's the Tanners. They weren't haters. The problem I have with a lot of these people that are trying to take the mantle of the Tanners, or try to emulate them, is that they're trying to cause division and weaponize Mormon history, and they're trying to hurt people and undermine their faith. And the issue I have with a lot of these Christians is the reason why so many Latter-day Saints just go straight to atheism is because of people like you. They see you outside doing your demonstrations, and they're like, you know what? If I were to ever go and leave this church, I definitely don't want to go over there. I don't want to be counted amongst those people. So I feel that one of the main reasons people who leave Mormonism become atheists is because of evangelicals. We need to own that. That's the reality. And I want to help show. And this is the thing. I have people go to me and say, Steve, my shelf broke a year ago. I don't know what I believe anymore, but you give me hope that I could find a way to believe in God again. See, that's what's different between me and what they're doing. And I'm not trying to tell people to leave the church. I tell people, I don't attack the church. I don't defend the church. I'm just there to be a neutral podcaster. But I do know there's a lot of things at stake here. And there are lives at stake. I had to talk somebody down from a suicide a few weeks ago. Okay. A Latter-day Saint. So that and as a Christian, that means a lot that I'm able to help. It's become a ministry in that way, where these people, they don't care. That all they care about is winning arguments and being right. That's not the right spirit. So I don't see any fruits of the Spirit ever. All these people that have attacked, I've yet to see one fruit. And I think to myself, man, I know all these Latter-day Saints, and I see all the fruits of the Spirit, and they're abundant. And I'm like, okay, I know what it's like to be Joseph Smith, because that Presbyterian minister said what he said to me. And I was like, yep, Joseph, I know exactly what it feels like.
Do you think that, obviously, there is certainly an ignorance of Latter-day Saints about the evangelical world, what is believed.
Yeah.
That's going to be pretty natural, I think, between any group. But we, again, being the minority, we're usually going to know a little bit more about what the majority is teaching, and what, we're going to hear it from a lot of different angles, right? Yeah. Whether it's in your school, at your work, in media, etc. Do you think that a lot of this from the evangelical side to the Latter-day Saints is just plain built on ignorance?
Yes. It's built on ignorance. And most Christians, evangelicals, really don't know much about their own faith either. So they're not well schooled. Let's just put it that way. And then the average Latter-day Saint probably is kind of, they just go through, they don't know a whole lot either. They're learning a lot about the history of their church from my channel. Okay. And, but yeah, and see, it's these peddlers of anti-Mormon propaganda that are able to take advantage of this ignorance and make a nice living, get nice book contracts, and bring in six figures. And hey, look, if I didn't have a moral center, man, I'd probably be doing the same thing and raising, let's save the Mormons. We're going to have a special fundraiser. We got to save the Mormons. There's, save the lost at any cost. We got, send me your money. I could do that. That's part of, I'm perfectly capable of doing that, but that would be for me. And then that would be just for me and my ego. And it would just be for me and lining my pocketbook. Now, there are some good, sincere Christians out there that are doing a good work. And and I don't want to paint them all with the broad strokes here. Okay. There are some good people out there. And I've even already commended a couple of them. Might be controversial for some of you, but there are good people in the evangelical world that are engaging the restoration, I think, in an adult, mature way. They're saying, this is what we believe. This is where we disagree, but we can have conversations. I think that's the spirit that I operate under too, rather than say that this is just all some big cult and we got to get people out of there. And it's like, it's just so sad. It's so sad. The name calling, they call it a brainwashing cult, in one of these books that I had read this, and it's sad and it's sick. And this is what these Christians, this is all they have, is garbage like this. Now, I will tell you that my friend, Dr. Kyle Bashirs, who is an assistant pastor at a mega church in Mobile, Alabama, he's got his MDiv, I believe, from the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. He's writing a book for a major Christian publisher that's going to reset everything. It's going to start a different conversation. This is 21st century evangelicalism engaging 21st century Latter-day Saintism. This is part of that. I'm part of that spearhead. And that book is like I said, it's going to be published by a Christian publisher, and I'm very excited about it. And he's told me bits and pieces. I've read some segments from it, and it's approaching it from a much kinder lens. And I honestly feel like we're cousins, man. The reality is we're part of the same family in many ways. You were birthed out of your Joseph Smith was born and raised in an evangelical world. Joseph Smith was a young Methodist exhorter, exhorting people to come to Christ in Methodist camp meetings. Okay. Joseph Smith, it was a born again Christian. Flat out. I'm just going to say it right now. What would later be called the first vision, I believe young Joseph Smith had what we'd call a born again experience. So, and so to me, and I always tell people on April 6, 1830, that assembly was full of born again, spirit filled, Bible believing Christians. Them's my people. And so I really feel like these, and look, were there things that would later happen that would cause there to be differences and rifts that were, that the church made some theological claims that obviously we don't agree with. Yes, I agree with you. But I think at the very center of primitive Mormonism is evangelicalism. And so I really feel like that's a really important that we acknowledge that, and that we as evangelicals need to kind of own that. And we need to reset the conversation, which I think is what we're starting to do. And we need to also just show that a lot of the stuff that evangelicals are putting out there about Mormonism is garbage.
So I think that from each side, there's a couple of things that maybe even can be explained by a phrase or two from both sides. One, from the Latter-day Saint side, would be, well, they're not part of the true church. Okay. And there's theology behind that. There's a belief system behind that. But depending on how you actually are using that,
right,
would determine how you would engage with someone outside of the church, right? On the other side, from the evangelical side, what we hear all the time is, well, you're not really Christians. You're not true Christians.
Right.
And that is it's a shock to us. We're like, what do you mean we're not true Christians? That guy, that you read about that was born to Mary in Bethlehem, that's who we worship. The one that healed everyone, the one that went to, Gethsemane and on the cross and then rose the third day. That's who we worship.
Yeah.
Now, the nature of that individual is something we disagree on.
Yes. And this is the thing. I would say, look, people say, you say that Mormons are Christians. I said, no, I've never said that. But what I will say, I'm using academic terms here. Okay. The academic terminology is that you guys are not Orthodox Nicene Christians. You're just not. And you would not acknowledge, you would say, yeah, we don't believe in the Trinity. We don't believe in this formula. You would agree that, yeah, we are not Nicene Christians. However, I would categorize you again in a scholarly sense, you guys, what I would call heterodox Christians. Okay. Meaning you're not Orthodox, but I would also say, I wouldn't necessarily say that we have to say that they're not Christian. I would say that you guys are a type of Christianity. I just think it's to call you guys a cult, to say that you're not Christians. Look, yeah, they're not Nicene Christians. Don't get me wrong. And I want to make it very clear that there are fundamental, theological differences that we do hold. But to say that Mormonism isn't Christian is just, it's not, it doesn't hold water anymore.
Yeah, I think you're on the right track there. I think what I would say, aside from orthodoxy, because we would believe we're Orthodox, right? But you
believe in Orthodox.
It's all perspective. Right. But I would say we're not. I would go beyond Nicene, and I would say we're not creedal Christians.
Right? Yeah,
I would say, most of the rest of Christianity is creedal Christian.
There is non-creedal Christian tradition.
We're non-creedal Christians.
And we have Restorationist Christians in our own camp. It's called Church of Christ, which was the name of your original church, the Stonewall Candlelight movement. Sidney Rigdon was a Restorationist. The idea that the rest of a restoration pre-existed the Mormon Restoration. And there's when we just want to go back to the Bible. We want to throw out all it's deeds, not creeds. So there is a very very strong tradition of non-creedal Christianity that exists, and in many ways has found its place in the Protestant world. So it's not even you guys taking that position, being non-creedal, that still, I think, still fits within the larger area
umbrella.
Of the umbrella of Christianity. Yeah.
So there's a couple things that I try to do with interfaith work. I've been able to develop relationships in the evangelical world, in the Catholic world, in the Jewish world, in Church of England, Southern Baptists specifically. But it's this. I always think of the woman at the well.
Yes.
And Christ going to her, a Samaritan, and his disciples saying, "What are you doing? What in the world are you doing?" And it's like, he's not saying, "Hey, I'm staying away from you," right? He's also not going up there and Bible bashing her, right? He's approaching her, and for us, we would see you as evangelicals as the woman at the well, and you would see us as the woman at the well, right? And I think that's a really important approach to look at. And secondarily, I've always thought there's another kind of filter that I put in place, and that is, well, when am I playing the religious role of the Secretary of Defense? And when am I playing the role of Secretary of State? And there are times when I need to play the role of Secretary of Defense, where I'm standing up for something that I believe is being attacked, right? But my default position, and it didn't always used to be this way, but my default position is, wherever possible, I want to be the Secretary of State.
Yep.
And build a relationship before I worry about who's right.
Yes.
And that has proven for me to be very fruitful. And there is something and I think this is a universal truth, right? Of something very rich and something very righteous, I'll say, in working with those that aren't like you. And trying to build, that's marriage even, it's working with someone who isn't you and trying to work things out, right? That's being a parent. It's the same thing with your kids. Your kids are not always like you, and it's building a relationship. And to me, that has a lot to do with charity and what I would call the pure love of Christ. And so if you want to do that, I think you have to be able to open a door that says, the relationship is important. That doesn't mean that either side has to give up on their belief system, on what they believe is true. For evangelicals, a very biblical, perhaps sola scriptura point of view, but that doesn't mean we can't build relationships and learn from each other.
So can I ask you a question? You have been engaging in this interfaith dialogue with other evangelicals and other groups as well. And I'd like just to hear from you. What kind of, have you gotten any pushback in the evangelical community? And two, have you gotten pushback from people in your camp that feel that you're going too far? Maybe I'm really curious about what your experiences have been doing this thing.
The answer is yes to both. Let me start on the negative here. So it's, there are those that feel that, especially because I've probably had Jeff on more than anybody else on my show, and that feel that I'm giving a platform to someone who is just a wolf in sheep's clothing and is pulling away all of these people. And I'm like, which I don't believe for a second, but it's more, I feel that there are two tracks, and Latter-day Saints, and probably I'm guessing, I don't know for sure, but I'm guessing evangelicals also are very used to a single tract of communication, and that is a missionary tract.
Right.
right? And it's like, no, this is, if you're not going down this road and we're having an interfaith discussion and between different, and you're not going in the Latter-day Saint world, if you're not inviting the missionaries over and making progress with the discussions and then reading the Book of Mormon and having a completely humble view at Moroni 10 and asking yourself the question, then you're not sincere, and you're not someone who is, who we should build a relationship with. And there are people that say those things. And I'm like, what are you talking about? What does that have anything to do with a relationship built between a child of God and another child of God? I understand it's important for us. And that I could wish for that with an evangelical. But that's not going to stop my relationship with that person. That is like saying, well, if you're not moving toward a path of being saved or following Christ, that he's just going to turn and leave you. You're done. And that to me is just not it's not a Christ-like role. And again, I'm not trying to put myself up as some example of that. I'm not, but so I think that's one side of it, of the coin. The other side is, on the Latter-day Saint side is, it's most people are very positive about it. They like to see this. A lot of Latter-day Saints do not feel welcomed. And so it's interesting to them that someone actually seems to be open and to be able to discuss things with them. And then on the evangelical side, I have had pushback on that. There's some that just do not want to get past the idea that I am the enemy, and it really is that. It is. I have had experiences from the time I was in school as a kid, right, where it was, my dad says you're going to hell, and that affects you,
Yeah,
right? It's like, oh, I see. Oh, okay. That's what some people think about me and my family. Or I've had several unfortunate experiences in business. I was a financial advisor. I had a wealth management firm for a while, and I had a few clients that once they found out I was a Latter-day Saint, they dropped me. And they were very clear on it. And they were just, we just can't do business with you.
Yep.
And it's like, okay, that's all right. And even
really
though there had been a very good rapport and relationship that had been built up there. Now, again, saying that is the minority.
Yep.
Right. That's definitely the minority in those cases. But that has happened. And those that I am able to build a relationship with, I really believe that on both sides, and I've got some relationships with some fairly prominent people. They just have a different point of view than those other individuals. They don't see, what would it be? They don't, and it's not just a relationship with a Latter-day Saint, right? So if this is someone from the Church of England, they're going to have the same type of openness to any evangelical or to the Catholics, the Episcopalian, they're going to have the same openness. So it's not just for Latter-day Saints, but that's the type of person. Last year, I did a 7-part series with Del Tackett. And some people don't know who Del Tackett is. Some people in the evangelical world don't know who he is, but he's pretty prominent. And he is the founder of the Truth Project. And this is something that is taught in numerous different churches across the country and beyond. He was on the team of George Bush, but he was very open, and he came on my program and did a 7-part series on his points of view, on his 7 threats, as he calls them. And he was completely open to it. And he's the same way with others. And it's like, but that's someone who has had a lot of life experience and a lot of cultural experience, and they're not just dogmatic in their own point of view. That doesn't mean he gives up his beliefs. That doesn't mean that he gives up his relationship with God or that it is detrimental to that in any way. But he's going to work with others who are not necessarily like him.
Mm. Well, thanks for answering that. It's very fascinating just to hear.
It's a long answer.
And no, it's fine. I like that because it's really important that we have these kind of conversations. That's why I really appreciate the work that you're doing. And I feel like it's so important that in this period of time, I think one of the most important interviews I've ever done on my channel was when you and Jacob Hansen came out and we talked about the issues happening in your church, and and people were very complimentary of it, saying, wow, like this is the only place this conversation can be held. What a great job. And you had a civil conversation about a very difficult topic. And I think that's the key thing. I think what you and I are doing is modeling how we can have civil conversations with people that are different than us, that we have disagreements with. And rather than talk about it and talk about how it's impossible, we actually just go ahead and do it. And we've done it. And we're showing that it can be done. Now, sometimes I've told you on the phone, I said, you've booked some guests on your program. I probably never would, but I'm not going to tell you who you can or can't talk to. I'll never go to another podcaster and say, you should or shouldn't do this. I'm like, no, you do you, I'll do me. Everybody has their own, set of rules, how they operate. And we all have our moral centers and how we deal with these things. But I just think it's really important that, as bad and as tumultuous as our world is right now as it currently stands, especially in this country, you and I are able to show how you're able to have civil conversations. Like what you're doing with Jeff is fantastic. So to me, that's really, I think that's our calling, honestly, to do this kind of work. I think that's why you and I are similar in many regards of how our outlooks on things. And look, you take positions and you're a man of conviction, and I appreciate that. And so I think it's just unfair to try to take people like Greg and I and then try to put us in a box. Well, we're not going to be put in a box. We're actually going to blow it up and say, listen, the way we've been doing things, the way the restoration in the evangelical world the way it's been going for the last 200 years, I think we need to do something different. And that's really honestly what I feel too, is, I didn't come on here to go and start like bashing people. I just want to bash. I'm opposed to their tactics. I really feel like they're not. Look, there's this one group that's based in your backyard that has a church, and they also have a big YouTube channel. And they believe they're Nicene Christians who believe there's one universal, true Christian Catholic Church. Okay, that's part of the Nicene Creed. And they have what is called table fencing, where basically only people in their little group can take communion. Now, I know they do something in the LDS world too, but they would exclude me from partaking. So when you take a position that we believe in one true universal Catholic Church and we fence the table, man, that's to me is as exclusionary as anything that you could say about the Latter-day Saint Church. And so to me, it's like I think that's just awful, that they would exclude a large percentage of evangelicals from participating in their own communion services. That's how weird and fringy it gets sometimes. And I just feel like these people have these platforms and they're just able to just use their blowhorn and just throw out, just look, they don't want to talk to me. They'll corner the missionaries on the street and do their aha camera thing. Look, we made a point. Oh, we sure showed him. Yeah. You know what? I dare you. I dare you guys to talk to me. I dare you to come on my program. I dare you to invite me to come on your program, because it will be a heck of a lot different conversation than what you're having is you're bullying people, and you're not doing anything Christian about it. And there's nothing Christ-like in anything that I see. And your nastiness towards people that are different than you, your nastiness towards LGBTQ people, the nastiness you have towards women, and just all these things, it's terrible. It's toxic, so toxic. And we need to fumigate the evangelical world of these types of ideas, not people, but these ideas that just really have just infected our people. And we need, I guess this is what I have to say about the evangelical world. Largely, we need Jesus. We have traded in our prophetic birthright as a people for raw political power. That's what we have decided to do as a people. And honestly, we have lost our salt and light as a result. That's how I call it, Greg. I mean, I really feel grieved to see what's happened to my community. And I'm grieved to see how these people will make money on the backs of lies about the Latter-day Saints. and demonizing you guys, bullying you guys, and making you guys out to be just this evil organization and evil people who are of the devil and are going to hell. Yeah, because if you believe that somebody's going to hell, you implicitly believe that they're evil. That's just how they would view how they view the world. That if don't profess the right creed, if you don't believe the right formula of the Trinity, if you don't believe this, and that, and all these things, then you're evil and you are deserving. Not only are you evil and wrong, you're deserving of eternal damnation and punishment. And this is a good thing that is happening. And then to top the whole thing off, these are Calvinists who believe in predestination. So they know there's once God has decided that you are going to hell, there's nothing that can be done. And my whole argument is, where is your humanity? That if you really believe that 90% of the world is destined to go to hell and suffer eternal torment, why in the world would you want to make their lives hell here on earth? Why don't you show some empathy for these people? If you really believe that these people are going to be suffering and there's nothing that you can do about it because God's already determined that they're going to hell, all right? And with that, and said, you know what? They're going to hell. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make their lives hell while here on earth. And my whole thing is, if I believe that, I'd be like, man, I feel really bad for these people. I'm going to show them as much love as I can because what they're heading for is not great. Which, of course, I don't believe that anymore. I was raised as a Calvinist, but that's what it does to you. It actually makes your other human image, it makes the other image bearers literally into demons. And that's a warped thinking. And I totally understand when Joseph Smith was told that there's all these other churches and all these other creeds, the stuff that they're teaching, I get it, because a lot of that stuff is poisonous. And I understand, I can resonate with what would, the finalized version of the 1838 version of the first vision. I can resonate with some of the messages that was going on there because Joseph Smith was being persecuted by the same spirit of persecution that Joseph Smith was being attacked by. It's happening to me. But guess what? It doesn't, I don't lose any sleep over, just so you know, I don't lose any sleep over these people. It has no effect on my life whatsoever. I'm more amused by it more than anything, but there is a lot at stake here, because to say that you're a Christian and look, I went to St. Petersburg, Florida, to go on a LGBTQ program, wearing a Jesus t-shirt, by the way, and I'm literally just reaching out to the LGBT community in my backyard, and I'm on this show, and one of the ladies on the panel goes to me and she says, "You know what? Evangelicals can be so cruel," and I said, "You know what? You're right. We can be very, very cruel. And they can be very cruel to LGBTQ people, and they can be very cruel to people that are different than them. And certainly 90% of evangelical churches, if a person were to come in and say that they're a Mormon, they would not be greeted. They would not be treated very well. And they would, in many cases, they would be told, you need to leave or you need to get saved. And I just feel like it's so sad to see this kind of stuff. Now, the good news is progress is being made. I'm working with Interfaith work with the church. My new co-host on the Utah Interfaith Forum channel is Monica Ringers, and she is a dynamo. She has a church calling to do interfaith work, and she's going to be my co-host on my Utah Interfaith channel. And we're just gonna do it, dude. We're just gonna start having these positive conversations. We're not going to let the negative people, the people who are toxic, it's just not going to have any effect on the work that we're doing. And I know that this is the Lord's work. This is my calling to do this.
Well, Stephen, I appreciate that. I think I will say that there's an awful lot of positive feedback that comes back from these conversations. One of the places that I would say specifically, but not exclusively, where that comes from are families that have both evangelicals and Latter-day Saints in them. And it's like, thank you so much. This is such a great, this is the kind of conversation I wish we had at the dinner table when we're all together.
Yeah.
Right. And sometimes it doesn't work out that way for them. And so I think that this helps articulate some of those avenues and those types of discussions that can take place there. But of course, it goes well beyond that, I believe. It's overall just, reaching out an olive branch. And you can hang on to your beliefs and open the door to other people. You have to be able to do that. And in the world we live in an information heavy world where you are bombarded with information from all angles, you're going to hear things from a lot of different sources anyway. And so to be able to say, okay, well, I'm going to search for the right sources that are not toxic because I'm going to hear these things anyway. And then that's kind of, that's kind of my, that's my strategy to some degree in doing the channel is, look, you're going to hear a lot about these things, whether it's attacking the Latter-day Saints or whether it is political issues or whether it's interfaith issues or anything else. Let's talk about it in a civil manner and in a way that at least there's an awareness. You make your own decision on it, but at least there's some awareness on these things.
Yeah, I think it's important that that these people and they know who they are. I've given enough information out there that they can figure out who I'm talking about. I just ask you, just look in the mirror and say, okay, am I really doing the Lord's work? Is this really the Spirit, or is this my ego? Is this works? I think a lot of this that they're very works based. They don't have a lot of grace in their lives. And so they feel this need that they have to save people. I've got to save the lost. No, you don't got to do nothing. You allow the Lord to work through you. That's the work, not the work you do. It's the Lord working through you. And I think so often these people want to think that the work they're doing is somehow they're going to save people. I'm like, no, my God is much bigger than what you can or can't do. God knows who his children are. And so I just feel like, you're making a nice income. You have a lot to lose by not doing what you're doing, but just ask yourself, what are my motivations? Why am I doing this? Why do I feel this need to go into Utah and attack a people group, try to undermine their institutions, try to make fun of, in many cases, they make fun. Some of these forums, some of the stuff that people send me, it's just so sickening to me and sad. So for those of you, the haters out there, the people that think that, the Mormons are of the devil and that they try to make Joseph Smith into the satanic character and then they want to demonize these people, these good people. What do you honestly think you can possibly accomplish? Because the reality of the situation is that all these Latter-day Saints, if and when they even just see you outside doing your things or see the materials that you put out, they will look at it and say, I don't want to have, I will tell you this, if I were to leave my church, I will never join their church. So really, what are you accomplishing? Now, of course, there'll be one or two people who say, well, I read this book and I became an evangelical Christian. But that's the 1% of the 99% that are paying no attention to you and heading straight for atheism. And I think they got to own that too. So I just think, what is your role? What are you trying to accomplish? I just want the Lord to operate through my life. And I want people to see Jesus operational in my life. And I want people to see the fruits of the Spirit operational. And I would just end it at this, Greg, is that, for all those of you that don't like me and are attacking me and asking me these questions about that are just so stupid. Even the questions themselves, the way they're formulated, is just ridiculous. I love you. And you are fellow image bearers. Okay? And I am concerned about you. I'm concerned about what this is doing to your soul. I'm concerned about what this is doing to your life. Because when you have all that in you, it has to do a lot of damage to you too. Maybe you feel really good when you have a debate and I sure scored some points and boy, we sure showed them. That's not the Spirit, that's your ego. Okay? Just remember that. I see, this is the problem I have with a lot of these people is that they use this up here and they don't use the heart. And this is operating in the flesh when all you are doing is using your brain and your intellect and your ability to make great arguments and do all this kind of stuff. You're actually operating in the flesh primarily. And again, God gave us one of the most, the most complex instrument in the universe, the human brain. Don't get me wrong. But if you rely totally on that and you lose touch with the Spirit and lose touch with the heart issues, I'm saying right now, you're operating in the flesh and you need to repent of that.
Great. Appreciate it. Well, Stephen, appreciate you. Appreciate your friendship. Appreciate what you're doing and the work you do. And we still haven't even met in person yet. All these times on Zoom together, we've never met in person. You're all the way back east, right?
Well, I'm in Florida. Yeah. So, and just so you know, I will be speaking at we will finally meet because you and I are keynote speakers at the Firm Foundation's Book of Mormon Expo.
Oh, you're speaking there. Awesome.
I'm on the top row with you now. They just put me in there. I right next, I think Cwic in between you and I, if I'm not mistaken, but basically I'm going to be the opening night, 7 p.m. Keynote speaker at the Firm Foundation conference. And so we'll meet hopefully that weekend because you're speaking at it. And it's a beautiful thing. I'm going to be going to General Conference for the Church of Jesus Christ in Monongahela, Pennsylvania, the Bickertonites. And then that next week that I'm flying out to Utah to do that. And then I'll be flying, hopefully on the 20th of April, I'll be flying into Independence, Missouri to speak at a Book of Mormon rally. So, I just love this world that I'm in. And I love the people of the Restoration. You guys are so awesome and you're so loving and you open doors for me. When I go to Utah, I don't have to pay for any meals. I often don't have to pay for any hotel rooms. I have houses to stay with. Beautiful, wonderful, fantastic people. Even my 2 Jewish friends that got the tour from Monica last week, they're like, these people are so nice and they're just wonderful people. I'm like, yeah, that's the point. And I'll leave it at this, Greg. I remember I was talking to David Boyce about this, and Greg and other evangelicals as well. I said, the beauty that the place that we are, the privileged place we get to be in is that we as outsiders, as people who are not part of the Latter-day Saint tradition, unlike all the other Protestant and evangelical critics of Mormonism, we have the unique place to be in to see the pearls of the Restoration. And Latter-day Saints are not going to show those pearls to the haters, but they share them with us. And once you've seen the pearls of the Restoration, you can't unsee them.
Right. Appreciate that, Stephen. Well, until April then, we'll see you then.
Looking forward to it, homie. Love you, brother.
Thanks. Bye. All right. Great. Well, that was good.